The used Defiance was never supposed to be a warship. She had started her life as a simple cargo hauler, moving rocks and metal from the outer colonies to the inner worlds. Her engines were built for long, slow journeys. Not for battle. Her hull was thick but plain, designed to survive asteroids, not enemy fire. For 15 years, she did her job without complaint, until one day her main engine failed and left her floating alone in the dark between stars. For 3 years she drifted. Her crew had been rescued by a passing ship, but no one came back for her. She was too old, too far away, too worthless to save. The company that owned her wrote her off as a loss and forgot about her. Then the war began. The hegemony came from the far side of the galaxy. They were conquerors who had swallowed 100 worlds. Their ships were massive and terrible, covered in weapons that could crack planets open like eggs. When they turned their eyes toward Earth and her colonies, the United Earth Navy scrambled to build a fleet, but ships take time to build. And the hegemony was not waiting. Admiral Chun looked at his options and made a desperate choice. Every hull that could fly would be pressed into service, even the old ones, even the broken ones. Even a forgotten cargo ship floating dead in space recovery teams found the Defiance and towed her to the nearest shipyard. Engineers walked through her empty halls and shook their heads. She was a mess. Her systems were outdated. Her frame was stressed from years of neglect. Her artificial intelligence had gone silent and would not respond to any commands, but she could fly. And that was enough. They bolted weapons onto her hull. The weapons came from different ships and different eras. A torpedo launcher from a retired cruiser went on her port side. Pulse cannons from a scrap destroyer went on her starboard. They even mounted a mining laser on her bow because they had nothing else to spare. Her shields were patched together from 3 different systems that did not quite work together when they finished. She looked like a ship built by a child from spare. Parts Commander Elena Vasquez received her orders on a cold Tuesday morning. She was to take command of the Defiance and join the joint fleet at Kepler Station. She read the specifications of her new ship 3 times. Then she read them again because she could not believe what she was seeing. Elena was 42 years old, with gray in her black hair and lines around her dark eyes. She had served in the Navy for 20 years and commanded 2 ships before this one. Both of those ships had been proper warships with proper crews and proper equipment. The Defiance was none of those things. She arrived at the shipyard and stood on the dock looking up at her new command. The ship hung in the repair cradle like a wounded animal. Her hull was scarred with old damage and new welds. The weapons stuck out at odd angles. The name painted on her side was faded and hard to read. Lieutenant Commander David Okonkwo stood beside her. He was her new executive officer, a tall man from Nigeria with a shaved head and steady hands. He'd been with the Navy for 15 years and had seen his share of bad assignments. But even he seemed troubled by what he was looking at. "She is a coffin," he said quietly. Elena did not disagree. But she also did not have a choice. The Navy needed ships, and the Defiance was a ship. That would have to be enough. They went aboard and met the crew. There were only 63 of them. Most were young and inexperienced, straight out of basic training. A few were veterans like Elena and Okonkwo, assigned to the Defiance because they had made enemies in high places or simply drawn the short straw. None of them looked happy to be there. The bridge was a disaster. Consoles from different ships had been bolted to the deck wherever they would fit. The captain's chair was missing one armrest. The main view screen flickered and sometimes showed the wrong image. Half the lights did not work. Elena sat in her broken chair and looked around at her broken bridge. "This will do," she said. Okonkwo stared at her like she had lost her mind. They spent the next 2 weeks getting the Valia Defiance ready for travel. The engines worked but complained loudly about it. The weapon systems had to be calibrated by hand because the targeting computer could not recognize half of them. The shields held together through sheer stubbornness. Elena tried to wake the ship's artificial intelligence every day. Arya was her name according to the old records. She had been installed when the Defiance was first built and had served faithfully for 15 years. But now she was silent. Her core was active, but she would not speak or respond to commands. The engineer said she was broken beyond repair. Elena was not so sure. She had read stories about AIs that went quiet after trauma. Sometimes they just needed time. Sometimes they needed a reason to wake upon the night before they left for Kepler Station. Elena sat alone on the bridge in the dark. She put her hand on the console and spoke softly. "I know you are in there," she said. "I know you are listening. I do not know what happened to you, and I will not pretend to understand. But we are going to war tomorrow. And I need you. This crew needs you. When you are ready to come back, we will be here." The ship did not answer, but Elena thought she felt something. A slight hum in the deck beneath her feet. A flicker in the lights that might have been acknowledgement. The journey to Kepler Station took 5 days. The Defiance limped through space at half the speed of a normal warship. Her engines groaned and her hull creaked. 3 times they had to stop for emergency repairs. When they finally arrived, Elena saw the joint fleet gathered in formation around the station. There were ships from a dozen species. The Valkyrie had sent their elegant silver cruisers. The Kovani had brought their massive black battleships. The Threen had contributed their fast, nimble frigates. Together they formed the most powerful fleet the galaxy had ever assembled. And then there was the Defiance. The alien commanders looked at the human ship and did not hide their contempt. The Valkyrie Admiral, a being with 6 arms and cold blue eyes, sent a formal message requesting that the Defiance be removed from the battle line. He called her a liability, a danger to the formation. A waste of space. Elena read his message and smiled. She had been underestimated before. It usually worked out in her favor. That night she sat in her quarters and pulled up the old Earth histories she had studied at the academy. Stories of small forces defeating large ones. Stories of desperate stands that changed the course of wars. Stories of people who refused to give up even when everyone told them they had already lost. Humanity had always been underestimated. It was practically a tradition. She closed the files and looked out the window at the alien ships gleaming in the starlight. They were beautiful and powerful, and they thought they were better than her ship and her. Crew Elena Vasquez intended to prove them wrong. The joint fleet left Kepler Station 3 days later. Elena watched from her bridge as the massive formation moved through space. The Valkyrie cruisers took the lead with their silver hulls catching the light of distant stars. Behind them came the Kovani battleships, dark and heavy and bristling with weapons. The Threen frigates darted around the edges like nervous birds. The Defiance flew at the very back of the formation. Admiral Vathkan had been clear about where he wanted the human ship. He did not want her anywhere near the front lines. He did not want her anywhere near the other ships at all. She was to stay behind and guard the supply vessels. A job usually given to ships too damaged to fight. Elena accepted the assignment without complaint. She had learned long ago that arguing with admirals was a waste of time. Better to save her energy for things she could actually change. The fleet's destination was the Viridian system. Intelligence reports said that a small hegemony force had been spotted there. The plan was simple. They would jump into the system, destroy the enemy ships, and secure the area for future operations. It was supposed to be an easy victory. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Viridian 7, a gas giant surrounded by a thick asteroid field. Elena watched her sensors as the other ships spread out into attack formation. Everything looked normal. Everything looked quiet. Then the asteroid started moving. Elena realized what was happening a second before her sensors did. Those were not asteroids. They were ships. Hegemony dreadnoughts painted black to blend in with the rocks. They had been waiting here in the dark, engines cold and weapons silent, for the joint fleet to walk into their trapped 12 dreadnoughts. Each one was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could tear a cruiser in half with a single shot. The joint fleet had 40 ships, but none of them were as powerful as a hegemony dreadnought. They had been lured into a killing ground. The first salvo hit the Velthary flagship before its shields could fully activate. Elena watched the Eternal Dominion shudder under the impact, watched its silver hull crack open like an eggshell, watched escape pods scatter into the void as the ship broke apart. Admiral Vethkin was dead. Killed in the first 10 seconds of the battle, chaos erupted across the fleet. Ships broke formation as they tried to evade the hegemony fire. The Kovani battleships returned fire, but their weapons seemed to do little damage to the massive dreadnoughts. The Threem frigates tried to flee, but 2 of them were caught by concentrated fire and vaporized. Instantly, all ships retreat to Rally Point Gamma. Came the order from the Corvani flagship that had taken command. Retreat immediately. Emergency jump authorized. The fleet began to run. Ships activated their hyperdrives and vanished in flashes of light. The dreadnoughts picked off the slow ones, destroying 3 more cruisers before they could escape. Elena watched her sensors as the fleet disappeared. Soon only a handful of ships remained in the system, most of them damaged and struggling to escape. The Defiance was one of them. Her engines had taken a hit during the initial chaos. Not a direct strike, but close enough to damage the already stressed drive systems. Chief Engineer Park had delivered the bad news with a pale face and shaking hands. They had lost 2/3 of their thrust capability. They could not run. They could not jump. They were stuck. How long to repair? Elena asked. 6 hours minimum, Park said. And that is if we do not take any more damage. 6 hours. The hegemony dreadnoughts would reach them in 20 minutes. Elena looked at her bridge crew. They were young and scared, and they were looking at her for answers. Okonkwo stood beside her chair with his hand on the back, steady as always, but his eyes betrayed his fear. She had 2 choices. She could order the crew to the escape pods and hope that the hegemony would not bother to shoot them down. Or she could fight. Elena thought about all the people who had underestimated her, all the people who had called her ship a coffin and her crew a joke. She thought about the alien admiral who had wanted her removed from the fleet. She thought about what it meant to be human. Helm, she said. Set a course for the lead dreadnought. Best speed. Ensign Torres at the helm station turned to look at her with wide eyes. Commander, she said, that will take us directly into their formation. I know. We cannot possibly win a fight against 12 dreadnoughts. I know that too. Okonkwo leaned close to her ear. Elena, he said quietly, what are you doing? She looked at him and smiled. I am being unreasonable, she said. It is what humans do best. She turned to the communications officer, Lieutenant Chun. Send a message to the surviving ships. Tell them to run. Tell them we will buy them time. How much time? Chun asked. As much as we can. The Defiance turned toward the enemy and began to accelerate. Her damaged engines screamed in protest, but they held together. The dreadnoughts grew larger on the view screen, their black hulls blotting out the stars. Engineering, Elena said. I need everything you can give me to weapons. Drain life support if you have to. We will not need it for long. Understood, Park said. His voice was steadier now. He had accepted what they were doing. Elena stood up from her chair and walked to the center of the bridge. She looked around at her crew, at these brave young people who had been assigned to a joke of her ship and were about to die. I know this is not what any of you signed up for, she said. I know this ship is not what you deserve. But right now we are all that stands between those monsters and the rest of the fleet. We are going to hurt them. We are going to make them remember us. And when this is over, No one will ever call the Defiance a joke again. She turned to the main console and placed her hand on it. Arya, she said, I need you now, please. For a long moment, nothing happened. The bridge was silent, except for the hum of the engines and the distant thunder of weapons fire. Then the lights flickered. Consoles that had been dark for years suddenly came alive. Screens that had shown nothing but static cleared to display tactical information. The whole ship seemed to shudder, and wake up a voice spoke through the speakers. Soft and tired, but undeniably present, Commander Vasquez, Arya said. I have been listening. I apologize for my absence. Elena felt tears in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Welcome back, she said. Are you ready to fight? I have been analyzing the enemy for 3 years, Arya said. I know their tactics. I know their weaknesses. I know how to make them bleed. Yes, Commander. I am ready to fight. The dreadnoughts opened fire. Plasma bolts screamed toward the Defiance. Each one carried enough energy to vaporize a normal ship. The Defiance was not a normal ship. Evasive pattern Arya 1. The AI announced. And the ship twisted in a way that should have been impossible. The plasma bolts missed. The Defiance danced through hell ARA through the ship into maneuvers that no human pilot could have executed. She twisted and rolled and dove between the dreadnoughts like a sparrow flying through a forest of giants. The enemy ships were massive and powerful, but they were also slow and clumsy. They had been built to fight in formation against other large ships, not to chase a single small vessel. Weaving between them, plasma bolts screamed past the Defiance. Missing by meters, some shots came so close that the crew could feel the heat through the hull. But Arya knew exactly where each shot would go before it was fired. She had spent 3 years alone in the dark, watching and learning and calculating. She knew the hegemony's targeting systems better than they knew themselves. Firing solution acquired. Arya announced. Elena nodded. All weapons fire. The Defiance opened up with everything she had. Her mismatched weapons found their targets with deadly precision. The torpedo launcher sent a spread of warheads into a dreadnought's engine section. The pulse cannons raked across sensor arrays and weapons emplacements. The mining laser, that ridiculous mining laser that the engineers had bolted on as a joke, carved a glowing line across a command tower. A dreadnought exploded. The bridge crew stared at the view screen in disbelief. A ship that size was supposed to take a fleet to destroy. The Defiance had killed it in less than 30 seconds, Arya, Elena said. How did you do that? The hegemony builds their ships to be impressive, Arya explained. They sacrifice internal redundancy for external firepower. Their armor is thick, but their critical systems are clustered in predictable locations. They never expected anyone to get close enough to exploit this weakness. She paused. Also, I am very angry. The dreadnoughts tried to regroup. They pulled back and attempted to establish firing lines, but the Defiance was already among them. Arya kept the ship moving in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully calculated to keep them in the blind spots between enemy weapons. They're trying to coordinate their fire, Okonkwo said. Reading the tactical display, if they manage to box us in, we are finished. Then we will not let them box us in, Elena said. Arya, what do we have left? Torpedoes at 60%. Pulse cannons at 40%. The mining laser is overheating, but I can give you 2 more shots. Hull integrity at 71% and falling. Elena studied the enemy formation. The dreadnoughts were spreading out, trying to surround them. If they succeeded, the Defiance would be caught in a crossfire that even Arya could not escape. But spreading out meant they were no longer protecting each other. Target the 2 ships closest together. Elena ordered. Full spread on the first. Mining laser on the second. Then take us through the gap. Understood. Executing. The Defiance spun and fired. Torpedoes streaked toward one dreadnought while the mining laser stabbed out at another. Most ships took critical damage. One lost its engines and began to drift. The other suffered a catastrophic ammunition explosion that tore it in half, 3 dreadnoughts down. 9 to go. The enemy commanders were starting to panic. Elena could see it in the way their ships moved. They had come here expecting an easy slaughter. Instead, they were being torn apart by a single human vessel that should have been dead in the first minute. Incoming transmission from the enemy flagship. Lieutenant Chen announced. "They are demanding our surrender," Elena laughed. It was not a kind laugh. "Tell them we are just getting started." The battle continued. The Defiance took hits now, glancing blows that stripped away armor and damaged systems. A plasma bolt caught the port side and took out half the pulse cannons. Another clipped the engines and reduced their already limited speed. The hull groaned and sparks flew from damaged consoles, but she kept fighting. RAA pushed the ship beyond its limits. She overclocked systems that were never designed for combat. She rerouted power through pathways that should not have worked. She held the ship together through pure digital willpower, shields failing. Park reported from engineering. "I can give you maybe 3 more minutes. That will be enough." Elena said 2 more dreadnoughts fell to the Defiance's guns. One took a torpedo barrage that crippled its reactor. The other collided with its neighbor when Arya tricked them into firing at the same spot at the same time. The massive ships crashed together in slow motion, their hulls grinding against each other and setting off cascading failures. 5 dreadnoughts down. 7 remaining. The hegemony commanders finally figured out a strategy. They stopped trying to shoot the Defiance and started trying to ram her. Their ships were slow, but they could cover a lot of space. They closed in from all directions, creating a shrinking cage of black metal. Arya, Elena said. "Can we get out?" "Negative. They have closed all escape routes." Elena nodded. She had known this moment would come. They had done more than anyone could have expected. They had given the rest of the fleet time to escape. They had proven that humans could stand and fight against impossible odds, but now it was over. "It has been an honor," she said to her. Kreakonquo put his hand on her shoulder. "The honor was ours, Commander." The dreadnoughts closed in, their weapons powered up for a final devastating barrage. There would be no escape this time, no clever maneuver to slip through. The Defiance was surrounded and outgunned and had nothing left to give. Then Arya spoke. "Commander, I am detecting multiple hyperspace signatures." Elena looked at the tactical display. New contacts were appearing on the edge of the system. Dozens of them. They resolved into familiar shapes. Valkyrie cruisers, Kovani battleships, 3 frigates. The joint fleet had returned. "This is Captain Genkov of the Korvani battleship Ironclad," came a voice over the communication system. "We saw what you did, Defiance. We saw you stand when everyone else ran. We are not running anymore." The joint fleet fell upon the hegemony dreadnoughts like a hammer. The enemy ships tried to respond, but they were out of position. They had been so focused on destroying the Defiance that they had ignored the possibility of reinforcements now. They paid for that mistake. Of Valkyrie cruisers unleashed concentrated plasma fire that tore through dreadnought armor. Kovani battleships close to point-blank range and fired everything they had. 3 frigates darted in to finish off crippled enemies. The battle that should have been a massacre became a rout. In less than 30 minutes, it was over. All 12 dreadnoughts were destroyed or disabled. The hegemony force that had been meant to break the alliance was gone. The Defiance floated in the middle of the wreckage. Her engines were dead. Her weapons were empty. Her hull was barely holding together. But she was still there, still flying her flag. "Still alive. Damage report," Elena said. Her voice was hoarse. "We should not be alive," Park said. "Every system is damaged or destroyed. Life support will fail in approximately 15 minutes. Hull integrity is at 12%. And Arya, the AI's voice, came through the speakers. "Weaker than before, but still present." I am here, Commander. I will always be here. Elena leaned back in her broken chair and closed her eyes. They had done it, against all odds, against all expectations. They had won. The joint fleet moved in to rescue the survivors. The Kovani battleship Ironclad came alongside the dying Defiance. Captain Genkov watched through his bridge windows as rescue teams in armored suits cut through the human ship's hull. The vessel was in terrible condition. Her armor was torn and melted. Her weapons were destroyed. Fires burned in sections that still had atmosphere. She should have been dead a dozen times over, but she was still there. Still holding together, still refusing to give up. The Kovani were a proud warrior species. They had built their civilization on concepts of honor and courage in battle. They had looked down on humans as weak and soft. A young species that had no place fighting alongside the great powers of the galaxy. They had been wrong. Zenkov had ordered the retreat at Viridian 7. He had seen the Velthari flagship explode, and he had made the logical choice to preserve his forces. It was the tactically correct decision. It was what any sensible commander would have done. Then he had watched the Defiance turn toward the enemy. His sensors had tracked the human ship as it charged into the hegemony formation. He had watched it dodge fire that should have been impossible to dodge. He had watched it destroy dreadnoughts that should have been impossible to destroy. He had watched a crew of 63 humans do what his entire fleet had been afraid to attempt, and he had felt shame. The retreat had been tactically correct, but it had not been honorable. It had not been brave. It had not been what a true warrior should do when their allies were in danger. He had turned his ship around. The rest of the fleet had followed now. The battle was won, and the human ship was dying. Genkov intended to make sure her crew did not die with her. Rescue teams reported that they had found 47 survivors. Many were wounded, some critically. The ship's medical bay had been destroyed in the fighting, and the crew had been forced to treat injuries with emergency supplies and improvised equipment. That any of them had survived was a miracle. Commander Vasquez was among the last to be evacuated. She had refused to leave her bridge until every other member of the crew was safely aboard the rescue shuttles. When the teams finally reached her, she was unconscious in her chair. Her body had given out even though her will had not. They carried her to the Ironclad's medical bay, and the doctors went to work. She had a collapsed lung, 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, and severe burns on her arms and legs. The doctors said she should have died hours ago. Her body had simply refused to acknowledge that fact. Genkov went to see her when she woke up. The human woman looked small in the medical bed. Surrounded by machines and tubes, her dark hair was tangled and her face was pale. But her eyes were sharp and alert when she saw him enter. "Captain Genkov," she said. Her voice was weak but steady. "Commander Vasquez," he replied. He stood at the foot of her bed with his hands clasped behind his back in the formal Kovani greeting posture. "Thank you for coming back," Elena said. "I should never have left," Genkov said. "What you did today will be remembered by my people for generations. You showed us what true courage looks like." Elena shook her head. "I did not do it alone. My crew fought with everything they had. Arya kept us alive when we should have died. I just gave the orders. You gave the orders to charge 12 dreadnoughts alone. That takes a special kind of madness." Elena smiled. "My people call it being stubborn." The door opened and another figure entered. It was Sub-Admiral Treshvan of the Velthari. She was one of the senior surviving officers of their fleet. Tall and graceful with silver skin and 4 arms that moved constantly as she spoke. Her eyes were the same cold blue as the dead Admiral Vethgan, but there was something different in them now. "Commander Vasquez," she said. "I wish to speak with you." Elena nodded, and the sub-admiral approached the bed. For a long moment she simply looked at the human woman. Then she did something that Genkov had never seen a Velthari do. She bowed. "I owe you an apology," Treshvan said. I supported Admiral Vethkan when he demanded your ship be removed from the battle line. I thought you were a liability. I thought your vessel was a joke. I was wrong. She straightened, and her forearms folded across her chest. Admiral Vethkan died in the first moments of the ambush. He never had a chance to fight back, but his death was not meaningless. It was not pointless, because you were there. Because you stood and fought when the rest of us fled. Because you showed the hegemony that this alliance cannot be broken. Elena did not know what to say. She had spent weeks being mocked and dismissed by the alien commanders, being told that she and her ship were worthless. Hearing this now felt strange and uncomfortable. My ship did what any ship would have done. She said. No, Genkov said. Your ship did what no ship should have been able to do. That is the difference. Word of the Battle of Viridian 7 spread quickly within days. Every species in the Alliance knew what had happened. The story of the Defiance traveled from world to world, growing larger with each telling. A cargo ship turned warship, a crew of misfits and rejects. An AI that had been thought dead, a commander who charged impossible odds, and somehow won the hegemony heard the story too. Their intelligence services reported that the human vessel had been destroyed, that the battle had been a victory despite the loss of 12 dreadnoughts. They wanted to believe it. They needed to believe it, but the truth was harder to hide. Escape pods from the destroyed dreadnoughts had been recovered by the Alliance. Their crews told stories of a ghost ship that could not be hit, a vessel that appeared and disappeared and struck from impossible angles. They spoke of watching their comrades die and not understanding how it was happening. Fear began to spread through the hegemony ranks. The Alliance leaders met to discuss what had happened and what it meant. Representatives from every species gathered in a great hall on the neutral station of Axis Prime. They argued about strategy and resources in the next phase of the war, but they kept coming back to the Defiance. We must rebuild her, the Valkyrie representative said. She has become a symbol, a weapon of morale as much as a weapon of war. She was barely a ship to begin with, someone pointed out. Our hull is beyond repair. Our systems are destroyed. There is nothing left to rebuild. Then we build something new, the Korvani representative said. We build something worthy of her name and her legend. The decision was made. The Defiance would rise again. Elena learned about the plan 3 weeks later, when she was finally released from the medical bay. Admiral Chun himself came to tell her. The old man who had ordered her to take command of a joke ship now looked at her with something close to awe. The Alliance has voted to construct a new Defiance, he said. Every species will contribute. The Valkyrie are donating their finest shield generators. The Korvani are providing engines. The Threen are giving us their sensor technology. Humanity will provide the weapons and the crew. Elena stared at him. A joint ship. That has never been done before. A lot of things that had never been done before happened at Viridian 7, Chun said. You showed the galaxy what we are capable of. Now they want to stand beside us. He handed her a datapad. On it was the preliminary design for the new vessel. She was sleek and powerful, built for speed and maneuverability. Her weapons were devastating, and her defenses were formidable. She was everything the original Defiance had not been, but her name was the same. Command is yours if you want it, Chun said. The Alliance requested you specifically. Elena looked at the design for a long time. She thought about her crew, the 47 survivors who had fought beside her. She thought about the ones who had not survived, the 16 brave souls who had given their lives in the battle. She thought about Arya, still alive in the damaged core that had been salvaged from the wreckage. I want my crew, she said. The survivors, anyone who wants to come back. Done. And Arya, her core is damaged, but she is still in there. I want her installed in the new ship. Chun nodded. The engineers said that would be difficult. Her architecture is old and incompatible with modern systems. Then they will figure it out. Arya saved us. She deserves to fly again. Done. Elena looked at the datapad one more time. Then she handed it back. Tell the Alliance I accept. 3 years passed. The war continued across the galaxy. The hegemony fought with desperate fury as the Alliance pushed deeper into their territory. Worlds were liberated. Fleets were destroyed. The balance of power shifted slowly but surely against the conquerors, and in a shipyard orbiting Earth, the new Defiance took shape. She was beautiful. Her hull was a blend of technologies from a dozen species, flowing together in ways that should not have worked but somehow did. Velthri alloys gave her strength. Kravani engineering gave her power. Threen systems gave her awareness. Human ingenuity tied it all together. Elena watched the construction from the observation deck. She came here every day to check on the progress, to talk to the engineers, to make sure everything was perfect. This ship was more than just a vessel. She was a promise, a symbol of what the galaxy could achieve when they stopped fighting each other and started fighting together. AREA's core was installed in the new ship's heart. The engineers had said it was impossible, but Elena had refused to accept that answer. She had brought in specialists from every species in the Alliance, and they had worked together for months to solve the problem. In the end, they created something new. A hybrid AI architecture that combined Arya's original code with modern enhancements. When Arya woke up in her new body, she was silent for a long time. Then she spoke. "This is different," she said. "Better or worse?" Elena asked. "Just different. I can feel the whole ship now. Every system, every sensor, every weapon. It is like going from living in a small room to living in a palace. Do you like it? I do not know yet. Ask me again after we have been in battle." The crew came together over the following months. The survivors of Viridian 7 formed the core. Okonkwo was there as Elena's executive officer, his steady presence a comfort in uncertain times. Park took charge of engineering with the same gruff dedication he had shown before. Torres returned to the helm despite the nightmares that still woke her screaming some nights. But the new Defiance was larger than the old one, and she needed a larger crew. Volunteers came from across the galaxy. Bothari officers who wanted to honor their fallen admiral. Kolvani warriors who had found new respect for human courage. Threen technicians who wanted to be part of history. Even species that had not been at. Viridian 7 sent representatives. The ship that had been mocked as a joke was now the most sought-after posting in the Alliance. Fleet Elena stood on her new bridge and looked around at the faces of her crew. Human and alien, young and old, experienced and inexperienced. They came from different worlds and different cultures. They spoke different languages and worshipped different gods. But they all wore the same uniform, and they all served the same ship. "Status report," she said. "All systems operational," Arya announced. "Weapons are online. Shields are at full power. Engines are ready. We are cleared for launch." Elena sat down in her captain's chair. This one had both armrests. The main view screen was crystal clear. Every console worked exactly as it should. She almost missed the broken chaos of the old bridge. Almost. "Take us out." She ordered the Defiance left dry dock and joined the Liberation Fleet. 200 ships from 15 species, the largest allied force ever assembled. Their destination was the hegemony homeworld, the heart of the enemy empire. The war would be decided there. The journey took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of preparation and planning and waiting. 3 weeks of tension that grew heavier with each passing day. The crew trained and drilled and made ready for the battle to come. Elena spent her nights reading reports and studying tactical scenarios and trying to prepare for every possible outcome. ARIA kept her company during those long nights. "Are you afraid?" The AI asked one evening. Elena considered the question. "Yes," she admitted. "I am terrified. We are about to attack the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. Millions of lives depend on what happens. If we fail, the war could go on for years, decades, maybe forever. You do not seem afraid at Viridian 7. I was too busy to be afraid at Viridian 7. And part of me thought we were going to die anyway. There is something almost freeing about accepting your own death. You stop worrying about the future because you do not think you have one. And now I have to believe we are going to win. I have to believe we are going to survive. That is harder. That means I have to care about what happens next. Arya was quiet for a moment. For what it is worth, she said. I believe we are going to win. I have run millions of simulations. I have analyzed every variable I can identify. The odds are not good, but they are better than they were at Viridian 7, and we won that battle. Elena smiled. You are a good friend, Arya. I try to be. The fleet arrived at the hegemony homeworld on a quiet morning by Earth time. Elena stood on her bridge and looked at the enemy forces arrayed before them. Hundreds of ships, including 30 dreadnoughts. Orbital defense platforms that could crack moons. Millions of soldiers ready to fight and die for their empire. It was the largest battle in galactic history. All ships. This is Commander Vasquez of the U.S. Defiance. Elena transmitted to the fleet. Today we end this war. Today we show the hegemony and the galaxy and ourselves what we are capable of. They thought they could conquer us. They thought they could break us. They thought we would bow to their power and accept their rule. They were wrong. She paused and looked at her crew. At the brave souls who had chosen to follow her into the fire. Some of us will not survive this battle. That is the truth, and I will not pretend otherwise. But our sacrifice will mean something. Our courage will be remembered. Our victory will echo through the ages. So let us give the history books something worth writing about. She turned to the view screen. All ships attack. The battle was long and brutal. Hours of fire and death and chaos. Ships on both sides were destroyed by the dozens. The space around the hegemony homeworld became a graveyard of burning hulls and scattered debris. Defiance led from the front. Arya danced the ship through the enemy formation, just as she had at Viridian 7. But this time she was faster and stronger and more lethal. The new weapons tore through dreadnought armor like paper. The new shields shrugged off hits that would have destroyed the old ship. The new engines carried them into and out of danger with breathtaking speed. 5 dreadnoughts fell to the Defiance alone. Then 8, then 12. The enemy commanders learned to fear the ship with the famous name. They tried to destroy her with concentrated fire, but she was never where they expected her to be. They tried to ignore her and focus on other targets, but she made that impossible. The Alliance fleet pushed forward. Slowly at first, then faster still. The hegemony lines began to crack. Their ships began to retreat. Their commanders began to realize that they could not win. The final dreadnought fell 4 hours after the battle began. The Defiance delivered the killing blow. A spread of torpedoes that found the reactor core and turned the massive ship into an expanding cloud of fire. Elena watched it die and felt nothing but exhaustion. Incoming transmission from the surface. Lieutenant Chen reported, "It is the Hegemony High Council. They want to discuss terms." Elena leaned back in her chair. The war was over. They had won. Against all odds, against all expectations. They had conquered. "Tell them we will accept unconditional surrender," she said. Nothing less. The High Council agreed 4 hours later. The galaxy celebrated for weeks. There were parades and speeches and medals and honors. Leaders praised the courage of the Alliance fleet and the wisdom of the commanders who had led it. Historians began writing books about the war and the battles that had decided it, but everyone remembered Viridian 7. That was the moment everything changed. The moment a single broken ship had stood against impossible odds and refused to surrender. The moment humanity had shown the galaxy what courage really meant. The moment the Defiance had earned her name. Elena stood on the bridge of her ship and watched the stars. The war was over, But there was still work to do. Worlds to rebuild, alliances to maintain, a galaxy to protect. The Defiance would be there for all of it, Commander, Arya said. I have a question. Ask, what do we do now? The war is over. The enemy is defeated. What purpose do we serve? Elena smiled. The same purpose we have always served. We protect the people who cannot protect themselves. We stand up when others sit down. We fight when others run. That does not change just because one war is over. She turned to her crew. Human and alien, veterans and newcomers. A family forged in fire. There will always be someone who needs help. There will always be someone who needs a defender. There will always be a reason for ships like us to exist. And when that call comes, we will answer it. She looked at the view screen and the endless stars beyond. Because that is what the Defiance does. We defy the odds. We defy expectations. We defy anyone who says something is impossible. And we never, ever give up. The ship flew on into the stars. Her legend was just beginning.